Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to have all 30 nights booked, right? But if you do the math with me, if someone's there for 10 nights, that's $3,000.
Right.
20 nights, that's 6,000. Okay. So on average, in that example, I can hang my hat on a conservative because there is some seasonality, right? We're busy during the summer. It's not as busy in the fall and the winter, but
Right.
I can hang my hat on an average comfortably of 4,500 to 5,000 per month as an average over 12 months.
What you don't know is costing you commas and zeros. Welcome to the Owner's Profit Playbook. I'm Pat Mancuso. Most entrepreneurs think their biggest challenge is growing revenue, but the real problem is the profit leaks hiding inside their business. On this show, we break down the strategies, structures, and financial blind spots that separate struggling operators from truly profitable businesses. Because building a business is one thing, but building a business that creates wealth, that's the real playbook.
Welcome to the Owner's Profit Playbook. My name is Pat Mancuso. We are excited that you are here today. Most real estate investors think they have a cash flow problem, but what they really have is a strategy problem. They're grinding through long-term rentals, collecting rent, managing tenants, waiting years for equity, when the short-term rental model is sitting right there, generating 2, 3, even 4 times the income on the same property. And now with AI automation entering the game, the investors who figure this out are the first that are going to lap everyone else. I love that. Today's guest has already built the playbook, and he's here to hand it to you. Before we bring on our guest today, a quick word from our sponsor. If you're a business owner providing health benefits to your team, there's a good chance you are overpaying by 30 to 40% and leaving real money on the table every single month. Mancuso Consulting Group helps business owners uncover the hidden savings in their health insurance costs without cutting benefits, changing doctors. In less than a minute, you can provide a few simple data points and receive an estimated cost savings within minutes. Find out what you've been overpaying by visiting www.reduceemployerpremiums.com. That's www.reduceemployerpremiums.com. So I'm super excited to get started with our rock star guest today for 2 reasons. I know he's going to share some amazing content with us, but also he's got a background in real estate, which if you have listened to me anytime in the past, you know is near and dear to my heart based upon my experience. So today's guest is a true powerhouse in real estate and innovation, Rich Munroe. With over 20 years of experience and more than 60 million in transactions, he's built a 75-property short-term rental portfolio and is shaping the future of investing through both real estate and AI automation. AI automation, we can't get away from that in today's world. As an Airbnb ambassador, national speaker, and founder of BNB Investing Group, Rich is helping entrepreneurs scale faster and more profitable. Rich came through an introduction from his team, so we're grateful for that connection with Rich and the team at Rise 25, who produces our podcast. So, Rich, welcome to the show.
Pat, thanks so much for having me.
So, I could go into the introduction, if you may, and all the background, but tell it in your words. I mean, obviously, you've got a pretty rich background there in what you're doing, and so share a little bit more how you got into real estate.
Yeah, most definitely. So, I basically got started in real estate by investing in tax liens. And my MO is kind of I learn something slowly and then I try to ramp it up and throw fire on it, throw gas on it and scale, right? So I use my Roth IRA, did about 4 or 5 acquisitions, learned about the due diligence that's required, the auction process, the how do you perfect title after redemption period, just A to Z. Basically raised a credit facility of about 10 million and then went out and, purchased about 350 properties, mostly here in Georgia, but also in Maryland. And kind of that's really was my intro into real estate. I had purchased some foreclosures before that and done a couple of rehabs, but to do it at scale, that's really what got me into it. And that kind of showed me the worst case scenario of properties that have been vacant for many, many years. And really understanding the rehab process, how do you estimate that, the whole the way that it works with wholesalers selling to investors, to rehabbers, and then they rehab it and sell it on the retail level. And most of those properties we sold out to other investors, let them do the rehab. But then we started, kind of cherry picking certain properties to do our own long-term rental portfolio. And having started that, that's really very quickly recognizing the headaches of a long-term landlord of, having to evict people right before the holidays because they're not paying the rent, having to rehab the property again. And then you're looking at the numbers like, how are we going to make this work? You really got to ramp up a lot of properties to be a consistent monthly revenue stream. And so that's when I looked at the short-term rental model. It was like a light bulb moment. You've got an asset. Why not try to maximize revenue? Make no mistake about it, it's a hospitality business. There's a lot of moving pieces, but you can put the right systems and teams in place to basically be able to do it at scale and be successful at it.
So we're definitely going to talk a lot about this. So I'm going to ask you a question only because if a listener hears right now and they're in a market in the country where the local municipalities are kind of starting to push back on this Airbnb thing, right? At least that's been what I've observed. Like, what would you say to them in terms of if they're here, you're going to hear your story today, they're going to hear this and they're going to go, yeah, but what would you share with them?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, Pat. That's really one of the biggest challenges in this space. But for me, because I eat, live, and breathe this,
Right.
I'm very active on the advocacy front. I had to form a nonprofit here in the city of Atlanta to fight a non-investor short-term rental ordinance. The way that I look at it, it's more about understanding the framework of what's going on in your area, in your city, in your county, before you even start to think about investing in this option. And you kind of navigate on the periphery, or there are a lot of jurisdictions that have very reasonable regulations. You have to apply for a business license, you get an inspection, you pay your taxes, and you kind of three strikes you're out, which keeps the bad apples out. So if you have
Right.
complaints for noise complaints or parking, you can get your license suspended, which is very reasonable. You want to be able to protect the neighborhood rights, and so. But you are right. There are a lot of major cities that are very aggressive with short-term rental regulations. And unfortunately, it's a continual pattern because the first time these city regulators hear about Airbnb is the bad stories, right?
Right.
That people that are abusing it and throwing parties. And so they start making these knee-jerk reaction changes to the regulations that are only really retrofitting for one problem or a large 1%, very small percentage of the total of listings that are out there. Most listing professionals are wanting to make sure that they protect the neighbors and have quiet times and not be a disturbance.
Well, and certainly that's also lends itself to they want to increase the value of that asset versus decreasing it. And so if they're not that typical, type of what you're talking about in terms of landlord or rental, then their value is going to go down. And the other thing that struck me, like you're talking about that momentum, if you may, we're starting to see the same momentum in data centers, right? Like municipalities are, having this knee-jerk reaction to I don't want a data center and out in the back 40. And so it's interesting that you presented it that way because I think that's absolutely true. It's a knee-jerk reaction to the smallest common denominator. So you talked about, I want to ask you this question. So you talked about the journey and you shifted. What was the biggest thing that caused you to shift? Like, what was the one thing that you're like, oh, I'm so glad that we made that shift, that we don't have to deal with that anymore?
Yeah, well, I really the beginning part of that, in addition to doing long-term rentals before I got into short-term rentals, I was also doing probably at that point 7 or 8 rehabs a year, right?
Okay.
And so in fix and flipping, you're really only as good as your next deal. You got to keep feeding that pipeline. The money's great, but there's a lot of financial stress in between. Contractors don't do what they should. You have to fire and install all over again. There's surprises through the rehab process. And I know, great, you got the property finished, but now it doesn't sell as quickly as you wanted it to.
Right.
And so you start digging into your profit by paying interest. So the financial stress of doing fix and flips, I wanted to find something that was more consistent, a monthly cash flow that wouldn't force me to make decisions to buy properties in our portfolio just because we have to feed the machine. And so that short-term rental gives you that consistency of that monthly cash flow. And whether you're doing it on your own properties, you can also do this with what's called rental arbitrage, where you can lease properties. We do that with single family and multifamily buildings as well. And you're essentially, investing in that monthly net cash flow so that you can have that cushion and not have to really be out there hunting for the next deal in order to, have your revenue come in.
So I want to come back to that. That's a concept I'm not sure I've heard before, at least phrased that way. I want to go back to the you as the business owner. So, our premise is the owner's profit playbook, where we help business owners close their gap between their finances and their freedom and the blind spots that they have. As a business owner in your journey, tell me the two biggest blind spots you had that you experienced, and what did it cost you?
Yeah, so the biggest blind spots I would say is being underestimating of what your actual monthly expenses are when you get one of these properties up and running. This is very different from a long-term rental. I'm responsible for the utilities, for the internet, landscaping, pest control. All that stuff adds up very quickly. And then whether you're doing it on a property that you own or if you're leasing a property, your numbers can potentially get very tight for you, and so you can end up in a situation where you've invested, just to do this correctly with short-term rentals on a 4-bedroom house. You've got to invest about $35,000 to stage and set it up in the beginning, right? So we're not talking about just walking into something and turning it on and off. You've
Right.
just forked over 35,000 that on a monthly basis you're looking to recoup that investment before you can start getting your net profit situated. So it's critical if you start making, some of those things I learned in the beginning was underestimating what some of those monthly expenses are, and, being in a situation where I have to shut some of those units down because they're not as profitable as we originally projected.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's very common for every business owner. So I love that you brought that up. So you're an Airbnb ambassador. For people who don't know what that means, what does that signal about where you sit in that industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big reasons why this is, probably within the last 10 years been a good option for real estate investors is because the Airbnb platform does such a great job of everything they're responsible for, right? They bring the guests, they handle the payments, and they, synchronize, the guest communications and the platform itself. They have a $2 million insurance policy that covers guest damages and things like that. So Airbnb is a big part of why this short-term rental option is such a success. Now, there are other platforms, Booking.com, VRBO, but no matter what you do as an investor in this space, 70 to 80% of your revenue is going to come from the Airbnb platform. And so being, again, because I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, I also help other investors in my program, and being an Airbnb ambassador gives me access to the Airbnb platform in such a way that I'm able to access people's new accounts, walk them through strategically how to set their listing up in the beginning, to maximize. There's certain things you can do to maximize your exposure on the listing. And it just gives us a way to be able to facilitate and help folks that are getting started and are new to getting set up on the platform.
So let's say that maybe I'm a business owner of another business, another industry, or I am just an individual who wants to get started in this arena. Tell me the first two or three things I need to consider as a business owner before I take any action.
Well, the first thing to consider is what strategy do you want to look at as a starting point? As I mentioned, um, there's acquisition. So obviously, if you own a property already that's a long-term rental that you can convert, if you some folks get into this, by house hacking, right? You can buy a primary residence and you have the basement level that's a separate entrance. So you can run that as a short-term rental. You can pay your mortgage in the meantime. And you basically can rinse and repeat. After a year, you can go buy another house and do the same thing. And so I've got clients that have kind of over time massed up about 10 properties by doing that house hack method. Now, there's also the rental arbitrage or the master lease option I mentioned.
Yeah.
And so that strategy allows you to very quickly get into this model and start generating monthly cash flow. You can engage with the landlord or the owner of the property, and everything's crystal clear in the lease. You're not leasing that property to stay there yourself. You're getting approval from the landlord to do the short-term rental or corporate housing. Landlords actually like this model better because they are a little bit more hands-off. So I prefer to do lower level maintenance. If the toilet clogs or the AC trips, the breaker trips, I want my handyman to go there because in the long-term rental property management world, it's not acceptable for the HVAC guy to come next Tuesday if somebody was checked in on Saturday and they're checking out on Monday, right? So I'd rather take control of that. And so the landlord owner immediately recognizes the benefit of working with us. And not only that, you might think that there's a higher volume of people coming and going, but we're professionally cleaning and inspecting those properties in between each guest turn 3 or 4 times a month. And so any issues that occur, we're making sure they get corrected right away. And so what tends to happen with these landlord relationships is very quickly they'll come to us and say, well, I've got these other properties around the corner that I own that the long-term tenant's been a headache. They're getting out of there. Are you interested in that one as well? So it's a good way to scale. And then the third strategy, which I haven't really touched on yet, once you've built this with a few listings and you've got your operations team, cleaning team, maintenance team, your guest communications in place, you can manage this for other investors as well. We've managed a lot of fix and flippers that fix properties up. They try to sell it. They're not selling it. They're looking for another option. I can step in and manage that property for them. And it's more than a long-term rental property manager. It's 25%. So now I can add that in as another diverse part of my cash flow, and my portfolio can consist of those three different strategies. So what I typically tell business owners or investors that are looking at this model, understand those three options first and see which one might be the best fit for where you are. You may already have some investment properties that are turnkey that you can kind of look at strategically, run a market analysis and see how the revenue looks and see if it's a worthy investment to do those. Or you can look at the other strategies as an option too.
So I want to go back. I with my background in real estate, I think I understand this, but I want to make sure for folks that are listening. So the landlord concept is I own an investment property. My original intention was to lease it out on a, annual basis. And the second option you suggested is those people, maybe they, they struggle with releasing the property with tenants, damage, those type of things. So they come and they go, okay, well, I think this might be a better option because potentially who we're attracting may be a better fit. Is that what you're talking about, that lease difference where you can go and do that relationship with them?
Yeah. So in a lot of markets, the increase in rent and the lower income, everybody's struggling for housing cost. And
Right.
there's a lot of large portfolios of long-term rentals that are sitting empty because they are not able to get eligible long-term tenants. And so we can step in. I'll give you an example. We had a 22 unit multifamily building in Midtown Atlanta. It was originally built in the 80s, but they did a full gut rehab and remodeled, updated everything, right? So they, just like single family, they did a hard money loan, but for multifamily to do that rehab, and then they're going to refi later. They did the rehab. Everything was wonderful. October, of the 22 units, they still had 8 of them sitting empty because of the rental market, right? So we stepped in as an option and basically staged and furnished and set those 8 units up for them and started generating short-term revenue, did more of kind of a profit share with them. But that allowed them to then get with their lender to do a refinance at 100% occupancy and be able to, get into a long-term loan and fit, those occupancy issues and gaps. So this works well for those types of situations, but it also is a good fit for a 4 or 5 bedroom house that's struggling with the same issue. They're not able to get eligible tenants. They're scratching their head. Maybe this guy's credit and income's not as good, but should I take the risk? And, we can step in and show them this option.
So I know this will be a hard question to answer, or maybe not. But if you look at as a percent, when I'm doing a short-term rental, am I seeing on average more revenue or less revenue versus a long-term rental? I know it's probably a hard question, but I'm thinking there is an opportunity based upon what you already described in the short-term rental market. Otherwise, why would you be doing it?
Yeah. I'll give you a specific example to kind of make that point go home. So let's say it's a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, doesn't have to be walkable in like hot areas, right? A regular 4-bedroom in the suburbs, and this is a key point we haven't touched on besides the regulations. I strongly recommend staying away from any properties that are in the HOA for the obvious reason, right?
Yep.
If they don't already restrict short-term rentals, they can do that at any time. There are some exceptions in beach and lake areas, of course, but as a general rule. So 4-bedroom, 2-bath house in the suburbs. You can, in suburbs of Atlanta, the market long-term rent on that would be about $2,200 a month, right? So if I own that property, I can rent it out as a long-term rental for $2,200. I can step into that property and just to give you the numbers, so the average nightly rate conservatively would be $300 a night that I can rent that for.
Fully furnished.
Fully furnished.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
now that doesn't mean I'm going to have all 30 nights booked, right? But if you do the math with me, if someone's there for 10 nights, that's $3,000.
Right.
20 nights, that's $6,000. Okay. So on average, in that example, I can hang my hat on a conservative because there is some seasonality, right? We're busy during the summer. It's not as busy in the fall and the winter.
Right.
But I can hang my hat on an average comfortably of 4,500 to 5,000 per month as an average over 12 months. Okay. So just to keep the numbers easy, 5,000 minus the 2,200, I'm at 2,800. I've got, like I mentioned before, utilities, internet, and so on, pest control, landscaping. So, I'm going to comfortably net anywhere from 1,800 to 2,000 a month as net income on that property. Now, how does that compare to a long-term rental? That's pretty good, right? It's
Pretty good.
2.5 times the revenue.
Right.
And so now I want to be crystal clear here. I touched on this earlier. This is not a cakewalk. This is not a turn it on and forget it, right?
Right.
Hospitality, you have to get 5-star reviews to be successful. It's a very competitive environment. Now, 5 years ago, anybody could do this and it'd be good, but there's a larger supply. About 40% of the current listings on Airbnb right now are managed by professional hosts, which means they're using pricing tools like hotels do. So the pricing changes on the
Dynamic pricing type of deal.
Yeah, they're being very responsive with their guest communications. I used to use virtual assistants, but now I use AI technology to do a lot of our guest communications. That's immediate.
Right.
Someone's making an inquiry at 11 o'clock at night from the West Coast, we're on the East Coast. If I don't answer their question, they're on to the next listing and booking with somebody else. So the responsiveness is key, right? So if you don't have those things in place to make sure that happens, all it takes is one bad review. Not only will you not be able to have your listing be shown for 14 days, but now your guests that are looking at your listing at a 3 average compared to a 5 average, it's going to be very difficult for you to get bookings. So it's a key
And
part.
isn't that crazy? I think that's just insane. Like, one little mistake. Last time I checked, we're human beings. Stuff happens.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Oh
That's
my
right.
gosh.
But you got to measure it somehow, right? So,
So you've owned Airbnbs for a while personally, I'm assuming, correct?
yeah, that's correct. Mhm.
Okay, so what if I'm hearing this and I'm going, hey, this doesn't sound like a bad deal. I mean, obviously it's, sometimes people can look at things and go, it's easy. But what are you seeing as an annual return on your investment on average?
On average, anywhere from 20 to 22%.
Yeah, that's and that's 20 to 22% on your money. That doesn't take into account appreciation on the
That's
value.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Are you licensed?
I am not a licensed real estate agent. I am an investor. And
Okay.
I actually prefer it that way. It gives me the ability to access, different distressed deals and do creative transactions. I can pick up properties subject to the existing mortgage, and there's a lot of other creative financing that you can acquire properties pretty quickly, creatively as well.
And you have, as a realtor for a long, long time, you have less risk as well, or less obligations, if you may, on certain things, working with the public. Um, you mentioned AI automation, and of course, AI is the deal, right? Like, oh my gosh, everything AI, AI, AI. And, it's funny because I read a lot of contrarian opinions to AI that there's certainly a good use for it. But you talked about the AI use in your business and um, talk about from your perspective as a business owner. I love what you're doing. You touched on a little bit, but if business owners are still like, hey, I don't need to consider AI, there's nothing AI can do in my business. Like, what do you think it's going to cost them if they ignore AI totally?
Right. So to do this at scale, I have I also do a podcast like you, and I interview short-term rental investors that are successful, and some of them had 100 properties or 200 properties, right? So to
Yep.
do this at scale, your monthly cost, your labor cost to support the operation for the hospitality, the back office, the guest communications, so at 75 properties, as an example, I still had four virtual assistants. This is a little over a year ago, on individual shifts so that we could have 24/7 coverage.
Right.
So those four virtual assistants, albeit it's offshore, it's cheaper labor than hiring in the States. My monthly expense was still 4,500 a month for that, to be able to have that support, and have that comfort that the guest communications is going to be handled immediately. I switched over to using AI about a year ago, and the technology, and everybody's probably fully aware of this, but the way that we do it in the beginning is they look at the last 12 months history on that listing of the guest communications, and they create a knowledge base. So now from minute one, they've got all the knowledge necessary to respond to the vast majority of any questions that come up. And obviously, these are all repetitive things. And
Yes.
I found, because obviously these are not employees, they're 24/7, they're consistent, they keep improving, they keep learning. Even with the best virtual assistant, the retention is hard, right? They might experience a problem they had 2 weeks ago and they forgot how to solve it, and they're raising their hand. How do I figure this out? With AI, that kind of goes out the window, right? So my
Yep.
monthly cost today, with that same coverage, that's even more efficient and more quality, is around $300 a month.
Wow. And what technology are you using for that? Like, again, people listening and they go, okay, so what are you using for that technology?
So depending on, obviously we're using AI as well to enhance our listings.
Right.
To do our listing descriptions. One of the algorithms on Airbnb's platform, the more changes and updated you keep your listing, the better exposure you're going to get. So we use that a lot with uploading pictures. You can upload 10 pictures and ask AI to tell you, based on this listing location and successful listings, put these in the correct order on the listing that's going to get us the most exposure. So there's things like that strategically. So there's multiple platforms that we use, but there's AI automation app is another company that I founded because I've kind of discovered the value of everything that I've done in my Airbnb business. And so we
Sure.
help other home services companies. We help real estate agents with AI voice, and AI chat that synchronizes with social media. We do a lot of database reactivation, automatically with AI that books appointments automatically on their calendar. So there's a lot of different strategies that we can employ, with that same tool that I use to kind of improve my Airbnb business.
I love it. I love it. And if business owners, and entrepreneurs aren't adopting AI, I'm not saying you need to go AI to one extreme, but you're talking. We talk on our show about closing profit gaps and profit leaks, and you just close one to the tune of almost $4,000 a month. And I would make this argument, although it'd be interesting, but I make the argument that the service that the customers get on the other end, for the most part, is more consistent. It's more in alignment, because you're removing the human aspect of it, which again online isn't necessarily what people want. They want consistency in messaging and that. So I want to ask you this. So because the owners that are listening right now, maybe they don't just have a rental strategy problem, they have an identity problem. They think of themselves as landlords, and landlords wait to collect, they hope, right? But what you've built, that's not a landlord business. I look at it as a hospitality and technology business. So
That's
help
great.
me reframe this. What has to shift in an owner's like head, if you may? What has to shift before the numbers can shift?
Well, I think it's just that is having a good understanding that most of your time and building your systems and your oversight is going to be around the number one thing of getting that 5-star review. So everything we do with our cleaners, everything we do with our maintenance, our systems, our pricing, our back office support, everything has that as the end goal. And so if you step into this thinking, oh, well, I just want to, try to charge as much money as I can and that's my focus. No, it's you've got to really have that be your top priority, and then everything else will follow from there.
Makes perfect sense. If someone listening right now, let's say they own one or two long-term rentals, what's the very first move they should make to evaluate the short-term rental opportunity?
Yeah, so we've touched on a few of these things. Checkbox number one, HOA, no HOA. Checkbox number two, if it's located in the city, then check the city regulations. If not, check the county that the property is located in. The quickest way to do that is because these things change very quickly at different hearings, and 1 month to month can be different. Yes, you can Google it or go to ChatGPT and check what that tells you, but I always like to pick up the phone and call the planning department in that jurisdiction and find out if you do have a short-term rental ordinance, what is it, what is required. Is there there's a lot of them that will have a primary residency requirement, which is obviously non-investor friendly. So you want to understand the landscape before that's really the first step, right? So once you've checked that second box, and you're good to go there, either there are regulations and they're crystal clear, it's a reasonable requirement. And then the next step is to do your market analysis to understand what the short-term rental revenue potential is in that particular market, right? Most markets are like we talked about with the numbers, 2.5 times, sometimes 3 times the long-term rents, but there are some areas that command a premium on long-term rents, and so that number starts to get tighter. So it just depends on those areas, just confirming that gap is big enough and makes sense for you to think about the investment to stage and set it up in the beginning. So there are multiple different ways to do the market analysis. One of the biggest players that's been out there the longest is called AirDNA. It's a separate company from Airbnb. They're basically doing data scrapes out there every minute to capture historical data on not only Airbnb, but also VRBO performance. They do this on a global basis. And so no matter where the property is located, this is a good starting point. It gives you a nice high-level summary of occupancy and nightly rate revenue, annual revenue potential. And then there's some other things you can do to kind of do a deeper dive to kind of firm that up. But that's where I would start to kind of see just conceptually if that's going to be a good option for you or not.
Are there any particular property types right now that work best either in your area or you feel in other areas?
Yeah, that's a great question, Pat. So having done this for a little over 11 years now, most investors that jump into this think, well, it's got to be a studio or 1 bedroom. It's similar to hotel. Let me start there. It's less to furnish it. That's got to be the most activity. What I've found kind of learning the hard way after many years is it's quite the opposite, right? So probably 60% of the listings in most markets are 1 and 2 bedrooms. Okay, so there's a large supply. Okay, and the activity over the last several years since COVID has kind of diminished. So occupancy levels have kind of softened, nightly rates have softened. There's been a lot of bad press about bad hosts that have entered the market and charging more fees than they should and telling people to take the trash out and wash the dishes. And So there's been a lot of like bad stuff happening there for one bedrooms. So that's kind of taken a little bit of a dive. Now, knowing what I know today, if you're starting the larger properties, the 4 bedroom, like I mentioned, example, 4 and 5 bedrooms are probably less than 10% in most markets as far as supply. And what we're finding, you mentioned data centers, right? There's a lot of travel of contractors. We have electricians that come into the market to work on a data center for 8 years. I mean, 8 weeks. And so they're importing these guys from other markets,
Right.
and they've got to stay in an economy stay hotel or something similar. When you've got 5 guys coming into town doing that, it's a makes a business decision. Okay, I can get 5 different hotel rooms for $100 a night or 150 a night for decent places, or I can get a nice, fully furnished 5 bedroom house with open kitchen and comfortable for them to each have a room, and I'm happy to pay 350, $400 a night, right?
Yeah.
And so the same thing happens with families that are traveling. They're looking at hotel options with a family of 10 people. It makes economic sense for them to pay 350, $400 a night to stay in a big house, more comfortable, have a more local environment as well. And so we found that the larger properties tend to do much better on occupancy and consistency and nightly rates than the smaller ones do. The
Yeah.
other thing to throw in there, another thing that's popular and still kind of pretty strong is the concept of tiny houses and living in smaller places. People want to experience that when they're traveling. So the ADUs, a lot of zoning areas are now allowing ADUs to be built in your backyard. So from an investment standpoint, if you're
What's
looking,
an ADU, just in case people don't know?
absolutely. So ADUs are called accessory dwelling units. And so
Okay.
these tend to be 800 to 700 to 800 square feet, usually like a loft style where you've got like an open space of a living room. If you can envision a 2-car garage, it's about the same size, right?
Okay.
So you've got your living room, your bathroom, and kitchen on one level. Sometimes they do the bedroom in a loft area upstairs, and then they have like outdoor space. So the tiny home is the similar to ADUs. And in most jurisdictions, you are allowed to build out on your property as long as your acreage is over a certain amount. And we've got a lot of investors that do this strategically and are making multiple revenue streams. Some people are downsizing and living in the ADU and then putting the three
Renting out their
four
house.
bedroom house
Yeah.
on Airbnb as well as an
Gosh.
option.
My gosh. There's a whole nother world out there, Rich. I mean, there's just a whole nother world out there. I was thinking when you were talking about the hotel thing, there's a brand in our suburb, and there's a company that I believe does tree trimming, and I'll drive by there and I'll see 8 trucks sitting there. And I'm just thinking about the opportunity, like right there's just a huge opportunity if I owned a short-term rental to go to that company and go, hey, we could save you a bunch of money, just those opportunities. I mean, it's just a really great way to look at things differently. So, as we're kind of coming to the end here, Rich, we have our theme is, owner's profit playbook. So we tend to kind of tag off of a football game, and we're kind of coming to the end. And so we have what we call our 2-minute drill. And so the 2-minute drill is short questions, straight answers, no overthinking. And so I want to ask you, are you ready for these?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Okay. Long-term rental or short-term rental for a first-time investor? Which one?
Short-term rental.
Biggest myth about short-term rentals?
That you have a lot of people coming and going, puts a lot of wear and tear on your property.
AI automation, overhyped or underused?
Underused.
Biggest horror story you've had as a personal owner of a short-term rental?
We had a teenager group that came into one of our properties and walked in with AK-47s.
Oh my.
They weren't making noise or anything. They just walked in, checked into the unit with a bunch of guns. Another part of our team is an armed security service, and so we had them removed immediately.
Oh my. Oh my. Greatest story as an owner of a BR, as a short-term rental?
Greatest story?
Yeah, I have a client. Like, do you have any stories like, oh my gosh, I'd love to tell that story?
So let's see here. So we've had a lot of success with higher end luxury properties that take a longer time to sell in a lot of times, right? So we had a investor. I personally experienced this myself. So I had my last rehab that I did was a purchase on Lake Lanier, which is a large lake in north of Atlanta. And so this was an old house built in the 60s. We did a full gut rehab and we basically ran it as a short-term rental, and we needed to sell it and we listed it, didn't sell. So one of the great things that this does as an option is we can also run it as a short-term rental at the same time as listed for sale. We can synchronize with the listing agent and the calendar, have viewings in between check-ins and check-outs. So long story short, I was able to maintain without having to sell it for a lower price, and we
Right.
moved out on it. And so we've done that same thing with other investors that have had properties that were delayed selling. They've
Yep.
already staged them in most cases, so it's really easy to step in and just add some more supplies, and we can generate revenue while they're waiting to sell it. So they're not backed into a corner to have to sell it at a lower price and lose money on it.
Love it. One market investor should be watching right now.
Well, and we haven't touched on this, but one of the great things about this model is you can do this anywhere in the world, right? So I'm originally from the Caribbean. I was born in Guyana. I grew up in Jamaica. And so I'm looking at opportunities in Panama. I'm going to Costa Rica in September. I was in Medellin, Colombia. So, this is an international option. The three strategies I talked about are available in any country you can think of. The rental arbitrage, managing other properties, or buying it, right? So it opens up total different opportunities. Folks that are going on vacation and holidays, when we go on vacation, we're looking at properties. So that's another
I
good
love it.
good way to do it.
If an owner takes one action after this episode, what should it be?
It should be adding this to your toolbox if you are looking at real estate or thinking about investing in real estate or already own real estate. All real estate is about the exit strategy. How are you going to, get out of that property successfully, whether it's on your cash flow or selling it.
Right.
And so there are short-term rentals, just one of many, right? So I've done assisted living properties, I've done co-living, home sharing. So there's a lot of different other strategies that you can get into. Sober living is a big one now as well, with real estate. So the biggest thing that I would recommend is just learning about this short-term rental model as a tool in your toolbox, and use it if you need to, or be able to consider it when you're looking at investments. Because the biggest thing for me is, if you own an asset, why not maximize the value of
Right.
the asset, right?
Yeah. We need to help more people build wealth, and real estate is one of those vehicles that really hasn't changed over the years. Real estate goes down, but then it always comes back. Gary Keller, who was a mentor to me and part of my development, if you may, and Keller Williams said they're not making any more dirt. So
That's right.
Real estate's always a good investment. So Rich, I'm going to give you an opportunity to share a final thought and how people can get in touch with you. So get ready for that. So real estate isn't just about properties, ladies and gentlemen. It's about a strategy. And the investors winning right now aren't working harder. They're working differently, and they're thinking differently. They made a shift from landlord to operator. And Rich has certainly talked and shared that with us today. From waiting for equity to generating cash flow now. Rich, where can people find you, plug into what you're doing at B&B Investing Group, and then give us your final thought?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can be found on most platforms for podcasts, for Apple, Spotify, and YouTube under B&B Investing. So it's B&B Investing. I can also put a link in the show notes for my calendar if you'd like to book a strategy call. I'm happy to spend 30 minutes with you, hear about your journey and how I might be able to help or point you in the right direction. And I just love the sharing economy, and I love helping folks learn about it and be able to have this as an option and do it at scale. And thank you so much for having me today, Pat. Really appreciate it.
Oh, no, we're super excited, Rich. And you've certainly, I know, opened my eyes to some different ways of looking at things in terms of the real estate, in terms of rental and opportunities to help business owners and individuals build their wealth. So we want to thank you very much, Rich, and everybody else. Certainly, we appreciate you listening, sharing, and all the major platforms. And we thank Rise25 again for facilitating the production of our episode. This has been the Owner's Profit Playbook. And as always, what you don't know is costing you commas and zeros. We'll see you on the next drive. Take care, everybody. Take care, Rich.
Thanks.
If you're serious about building a more profitable business, make sure you subscribe to the Owner's Profit Playbook so you never miss an episode. And if you know another business owner who could benefit from this conversation, share it with them. To learn more about how we help business owners uncover hidden opportunities and strengthen their financial strategy, visit mancusocg.com. And remember, what you don't know is costing you commas and zeros.